Good afternoon. You're watching Businessworld Live. I'm Jes Delos Santos. Let's take a look at how the local bourse closed today, Monday. All right, local stocks continue their retreat after the long weekend. The index capped off day one of MECQ and the NCR Plus bubble down by 0.4% to 6,518.64. Investors not that optimistic despite lockdowns being eased across Metro Manila and the nearby provinces of Bulacan, Rizal, Laguna, and Cavite. Now, Matt Cabangon of AAA Security said this morning, he tells Businessworld Live, that the market is lacking confidence right now, that there's a direction towards where the country is marching to, especially in ending the crisis. He says there's not much of a difference between this week and last week. It was only today, though, that we get more clarity on what exactly is allowed or not under MECQ, but we'll get to that later in the program. So far, according to Cabangon, the optimism that the market had at the start of the year, you have the index starting at 7,000, has already waned, with the index on a slowdown trend now at 6,500. Year to date, as you can see right here, the PSEI is down by as much as 8 7/10%. But looking at today's performers here, it's a mixed outing here. For our restaurants and mall operators, especially as the government eases restrictions in the bubble, we try to take a look at mall operators here, a number of them. And on the upside here, you have the likes of MECQ, at least ending the day up by 1 1/10%, now at 3 pesos and 69 centavos. You also have SM Investments here, of course, the mother of SM Prime here, up by over 7/10%, now at 972 apiece. But on the other hand, you have Ayala Land ending the day in the negative territory despite that bit of news of restrictions being eased. Ayala Land now down 1 3/10%. You also have a number of restaurant operators here in Jollibee, likewise, ending the day on the upside, gaining 4/10%. However, the downside, you have Alliance Global capping the day off, at least inching lower by 2 6/10%, as well as restaurant supplier URC, as you can see, are also in the red, down 3 3/10%. But enough of that, let's have a look at some specific stocks here, particularly cement manufacturer Eagle Cement. Why is that? Because the operator is actually bucking the sell-off in the index today. That rose close to 5.5% today, even climbing past 6% earlier in the day. That's after it announced that its Bulacan expansion project is close to completion and will be operational by the second quarter. That is expected to boost their capacity by 1.5 million metric tons, further ramping up their capacity up to 8.6 million metric tons. Now, that news overshadowing the fact that their net income for full year 2020 dipped by 44% to 3.4 billion pesos. Sales were also down 30%. This, of course, as lockdown measures disrupted operations. The Bulacan extension news pushed Eagle shares up to 11 pesos and 60 centavos a share. Now, from Eagle Cement, let's move on over this time around to another stock that's banking on expansion this year. I'm talking about Now Corp. They are planning to sell shares this year to raise financing for their expansion plans. No details yet really on what those expansion plans entail, but the plan here is now at least to broaden their capital base and promote a wider dispersion of the common shares of the company to a broad spectrum of investors. PNB Capital was tapped as issue manager as well as financial advisor and book runner. As you can see here, now shares rose close to 9 8/10%, now valued at 3 pesos and 14 centavos a share. Here are other headlines we're keeping our eyes on. Despite new investors holding back, foreign direct investments posted gains in January as foreign companies managed to secure funds from their headquarters. The Philippine Star reports that FDI registered a net inflow of $961 million in January, up 41.5% year-on-year. But despite headline figures depicting some rebound, the recovery itself appeared shallow. BSP reports that debt placements were the lone FDI driver, which more than doubled year on year to $535 million. Debt placements represent local offices of foreign firms borrowing from their mother companies abroad. These debts, in turn, are believed to be used by local offices to fund their operations and expansion.
At 7.8%.
Equity investment of new investors dipped 1.4%, while investments of foreign companies that opted to reinvest their earnings in the country dropped 9.2%. Despite this, BSP is convinced that the overall growth in FDIs is a result of investors' optimism.
The business process.
Now, the government looks to begin the inoculation of the so-called A4 priority group by either May or June. NEDA Undersecretary Rose De Leon said the cluster is composed of those working in sectors that have high levels of interaction with or exposure to the public, as well as essential economic workers. Among them are those working in commuter transport sector, food retail, food, beverage, and medicine manufacturing, market vendors, and frontline government workers. Excluded from the list is the media sector, but De Leon said it's still up to the IATF to decide whether or not media workers will be included in the A4 group. Are you among those who are still wondering about the difference between ECQ and MECQ? Well, the palace has just announced its new guidelines for the modified enhanced community quarantine, and here's what you should know. Unified curfew hours in Metro Manila will start from 8 p.m. to 5 in the morning starting today until MECQ is lifted on April 30. Persons below 18 and above 65 are not allowed outside their homes, but LGUs may relax their minimum age restrictions down to 15 years old. Entertainment venues, personal care services, and other similar establishments are still not allowed to reopen under MECQ. Meanwhile, limited religious gatherings are allowed under MECQ, but only at 10% capacity. While indoor dining is still not allowed, alfresco dining may resume, but only at 50% capacity.
Liquidity buffers at ample loss reserves. Total resources ng Philippine banking system para support.
Given that bit of news, can restaurants finally breathe a sigh of relief, or will this not do much for the ailing industry? To answer that, we have Eric Teng, President of Resto PH. Good afternoon, Eric.
2% ng nakaraan.
Good afternoon.
All right, so outdoor dining now allowed, at least at 50% capacity. Does this in any way spark hope for the sector?
Well, as we always say, it's better than nothing, which is what we had for the last 2 weeks. However, there are very few restaurants that can accommodate outdoor dining. Majority, I'd say over 90%, don't have alfresco dining at all. And just 50% capacity allowed at that. So I think people will be, 10% of pre-COVID sales would be very difficult to achieve given the current circumstances.
Okay, so that's a very staggering number here. 90% do not have capacity to do alfresco. A majority of that would, I assume, would be those at least in malls.
Yes, malls, food courts. There are so many restaurants that require air conditioning that were never set up for outdoors. Those who are lucky enough to have a balcony, a terrace, they still can only do 50%. And you still have to worry about manpower being able to get to the workplace in the first place. Then, of course, there's a curfew. Even though it's been relaxed from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m., it's still quite restricted because it doesn't really allow for any dining business with that kind of curfew.
So that would mean still heavy reliance on delivery services. And given that, can you give us an idea, really, as to how much of a share do delivery services have in the total revenue for food operators?
Well, currently it can be, of course, if you don't have dining, it's 100% now of total sales. But however, the malls or where we're located, they have a very different setup. For delivery, it's not very practical for delivery aggregators to get to the restaurants. If you have a curbside location, that can be better.
Now, of course, there is an ongoing notion, at least, that COVID-19 spread rather increases in a restaurant setup. Did you observe that when restrictions were eased and indoor dining was restored at the latter part of
Nagsimula na po yung
2020?
acquire base fee charging
No,
sa
we
mga
actually
ATM simula
have been
April
arguing that
7. Ano
point.
daw po ibig
Last
sabihin
year, from
nito
September
at
to
ano ang
December, our
bagong
sales
singil ng
doubled
mga
and tripled,
bangko sa
and yet
interbank
the COVID numbers
transactions?
declined. It wasn't directly related to
Well,
us.
ang
Even today, when we're talking to
acquire-based
people
fee
from
charging
DOH,
model ay
DTI,
isang
or the
marketplace at
other
transparent pricing model kung
departments in
saan ang
government,
may-ari ng
agencies in
ATM
government, they're
ang
not pointing to the
mag-set ng
restaurants
fee
as
para
a
sa
cause for any
withdrawal
spread. It's more
at balancing
the
rate
community spread, the
transactions.
workplace spread,
Ito lamang ay
home
para sa
parties,
mga
which we're
consumer
very
na
much against.
mag-withdraw
And
from
sometimes
balancing
we
rate
were
sa mga
contesting
ATM
that if you close down
hindi
restaurants, you don't
pag
really
may-ari
kill the
ng
demand. You
kanilang
just
sariling
divert it to
bangko. Kasi
home
kung
parties, which is where
gagamitin
it's
mo
more
yung
dangerous
ATM
because
ng
it's not
sariling bangko,
controlled.
wala
You go
pa
to
rin
any mall or
charge
any
yun.
restaurant, people
So,
check the
sa bagong
temperature.
sistema,
You have those
nakakapamili
dividers,
ka
you're spaced apart,
kung
you're
sino
required
ang
to wear a
mas
mask. That doesn't exist. Those rules don't
doon
exist
sa
when it comes to home
sa mga
parties.
ATM.
Would you say then that the restrictions here, especially
Kasi
when it
sa
comes to
kasalukuyan,
dining and
walang
restaurants, is quite
insentibo ng mga
unwarranted?
ATM owners na lumabas ng
I would
Manila
say
sa
that. I would say that we have
Region
to
4A.
be
Kasi
careful
nga,
about
iba yung pricing system.
all
Ngayon, may
movements of
engganyo na
people.
sila
We
dahil
can accept what government is
merong
saying that
posibilidad
we
na
have to be
kumita sila
careful.
kung
We're with them. We don't
kung
argue that we have to keep the numbers down. The COVID surge these days is quite dangerous. What we're hoping for is that we can help government get through this very difficult stage by allowing vaccinated people to come to our restaurants to eat. We've been asking for something of a vaccine pass, where if you've had your second shot, you can come to restaurants and enjoy a meal, or even go to certain places you would not have been allowed to go to before. This can jumpstart the economy. We're also trying to create some sort of a vaccine promo. A vaccinated promo. So those who have been vaccinated after their second shot, they can come and get certain deals or promos from restaurants or other establishments.
And how many establishments do you think are willing to participate, at least in these programs that you just mentioned?
Almost all the members of Resto PH are in on it. We just want to find the right timing for this because there's no point doing it in April. So we're looking at late May or early June. And,
All right, late May or early. Okay. Now, also, do you have Resto's closing shop completely during the 2-week ECQ? And all in all, how many restaurants have shut down so far since the onset of the pandemic?
That's a difficult question to answer because we've been trying to get data for the longest time. The data isn't available because even government agencies, they don't have the people to really look for these numbers. We were asking, but if you go around the mall, just observe places like Bulacan or Maguinao, it's easy to see that the number of restaurants, they're decimated. I would estimate, only a guesstimate, that up to half or even more than half of independent restaurants have actually closed down. We used to employ more than 2 million people, including the hotel industry. I think now we're less than 1 million. So it's a big hit for us. It's a very painful hit. But we're hopeful that after April 30, we can have a better meal. And we enjoin everyone to take the sacrifice now. If we don't do this now, we're going to pay a higher price later on when we don't control the numbers.
But are you projecting more closures for the rest of the year? What's the outlook like here for the sector?
It's very bleak. We're concerned that the public have this fear of indoor dining, or that indoor dining might have this long-term stigma. But of course, we're hopeful that once you get your vaccinations done, once the numbers stabilize or gets to a manageable level, you still want to celebrate a birthday party or a wedding anniversary in a restaurant. So that's still something that we're hopeful for the long term. How soon we can recover, that seems to be a goalpost that keeps moving left, right, up and down. It's very hard to pinpoint.
Of course, we are one of the sector and hoping that recovery would soon be in sight for the industry in general. Thank you very much for your time this afternoon, Eric Teng, President of Resto PH.
Thank you.
And those are the biggest news this trading day, April 12, 2021. Catch Business World live again tomorrow at 9:30 a.m. for the market open and 3:15 p.m. for the market close. I'm Jes Delos Santos. We are One News. Mask on, wash hands, and stay safe, Philippines.